Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
This episode is brought to you by Google Gemini. With the Gemini app, you can talk live and have a real-time conversation with an AI assistant. It's great for all kinds of things, like if you want to practice for an upcoming interview, ask for advice on things to do in a new city, or brainstorm creative ideas. And by the way, this script was actually read by Gemini. Download the Gemini app for iOS and Android today. Must be 18 plus to use Gemini Live.
70,000 people are here, and Bob Dylan is the reason for it.
Inspired by the true story.
If anyone is going to hold your attention on a stage, you have to kind of be a freak.
Are you a freak?
Hope so.
And starring Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan. He defied everyone.
Turn it down!
Play loud!
To change everything.
Make some noise, BD.
Timothée Chalamet, Edward Norton, Elle Fanning, Monica Barbaro, a complete unknown. Now playing only in theaters. Rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Achtung, Achtung! Merry Christmas, everyone. We're back with our Christmas specials. In the last episode, I shared the brutal story of Finnish fighting in Christmas 1939. John, I hope your 1944 story is any better. I mean, where does it take place?
Probably in the Hurtgen Forest or at the edges of it, maybe somewhere near the Belgian-German border. And we tend to forget that fighting was still going on there periodically, even though the Battle of the Bulge was happening. And this incident is often described as happening in the context of the Battle of the Bulge, which may be technically incorrect because it could have happened a little farther north of there. It involves soldiers from the 8th Infantry Division, which is a unit that often described itself as participating in the Bulge, but doesn't actually get official credit. Okay, so we get that part out of the way. I don't think that's what's most important. What's most important is this very human incident that happens here. So there was a small German family, a mother and her son, the Vinkens, Elizabeth Vinken and her son, Carl. Elizabeth's husband was a baker who helped feed the German army, and he was gone, from the family doing that as the winter was unfolding. So she and Carl took to a family cabin, or it was at least maybe owned by a friend of theirs, something like that. And they go to this cabin that's right there on the Belgian-German border, and they're hoping to hunker down for the winter. And they've got some food, and they've got obviously their shelter, and they have wood for the fire and all that stuff. So they're hoping to just be anonymous, but on Christmas Eve, as they told it, there was a knock at the door. And, they go and they answer the door, and there's 3 American soldiers, including one who's wounded, and he's wounded badly enough that he certainly needs some medical attention and some help. So these are German nationals, remember, Elizabeth and Carl. And if they take in the American soldiers, they could get reprisals from the Nazi authorities. I mean, that's aid and comfort to the enemy. It could be thought of as treason. And who knows what that could mean for her husband working for the German army and all that kind of thing. So you have a little bit of that dynamic happening. So they have to make a decision. What do we do with these guys? And also, how are they going to communicate? The Americans didn't really speak German. They didn't speak English, but one of the American soldiers is able to converse with Elizabeth in French. So she decides that she's going to take these guys in. And so the wounded soldier is put on Carl's bed. Carl, again, is the 12-year-old. And the other 2 are taking shelter in the house. And at this stage, I think the Vinkens are just hoping they'll be able to help these guys out. It'll all be quite anonymous. And then, the Americans will move on at some point. A situation that could have created much more danger occurs a few hours later when there's another knock at the door. And, originally Elizabeth is thinking, oh, these are going to be more Americans. No, it's German soldiers. It's 4 German soldiers. And so who knows what the disposition of these German soldiers are going to be.
Oh, my God.
I mean, what's going to happen in terms of the Americans and the Germans seeing each other, and what are the German soldiers' attitudes about the Vinkens taking in the GIs and all this. And so all of this plays out in really a few tense moments when Elizabeth has to assess the situation and the German soldiers, what are they looking for? Just like what the Americans are looking for. They're looking for some warmth, some shelter, maybe a little bit of food. And in their viewpoint, this is a home game. This is people who are German like them. But now they're confronted with these GIs being right there. So it's a very, very tense situation. And by the testimony of Carl, who told the story for the rest of his life, he was the one who told it, not Elizabeth, really. So we're seeing her through his eyes. By his testimony, she was a very quick thinker and very firm, had a very assertive personality. And she basically said to the Germans, yes, we will take you in. And she had said this to the Americans, we'll take you in, but this is a truce area. In other words, you're not going to have your weapons. So think about what that means from a soldier's point of view, right? I mean, it's a tense few seconds communicating to the Americans. So obviously the Germans have a real advantage. They can converse in German with the Winkens. And so imagine for the Americans, they're wondering, what are they talking about? I mean, wouldn't you be a little worried? Like, are they plotting against us? What's in the offing? But the way she was able to communicate it very firmly. You guys will not have your weapons in this house. And so they agreed, and they all stacked their weapons on a wood pile outside. So the Germans have rifles. I think maybe they've got a couple Panzerfaust, maybe a couple burp guns, whatever. The Americans have their M1 Garands. One of them might have had a Tommy gun, but, in other words, they're having to really take that leap of faith. It's a little tense, as you might imagine, in this little cabin.
Yeah.
So here you are with these 7 guys who could very much be adversaries, one of whom is wounded badly enough that he's lying in Carl's bed, kind of delirious, and by Carl's testimony, white as a sheet, which means he's lost blood. This is the source of some more tension. What's going to happen with him and how they're going to care for him. And what really helps diffuse the tension is that one of the German soldiers had apparently attended medical school before joining the army. And Elizabeth communicated the situation to the German soldiers. When this guy hears about what's up with the wounded guy lying in the bed, he says, I think I can help him. And so here's a German soldier going in to help this wounded American in this truce. And it's Christmas Eve. I would bet that all of these guys thought of themselves as Christians of one sort or another, I would think. And so when that happened, when the German soldier cares for this wounded American, that really helps the American mood quite a bit. These guys are like, okay, they're not plotting against us. The guy's trying to help us, whatever it would be. So what ends up happening out of this whole thing, apparently, the Winkens got as much food as they could, including a chicken that Elizabeth had nicknamed Herman after a certain German air marshal and number 2 in the Nazi hierarchy. And the reason he was named Herman was she had total disdain for our buddy Hermann Goering, but also this they were fattening up this chicken as much as they possibly could. So they slaughter the prized chicken. They have potato soup. They have bread. The Germans have contributed some bread. I don't know that the Americans had any food on them. That doesn't survive in the testimony. I would think maybe a K-ration or 2, but who knows? And they combine to create this Christmas Eve feast that everyone sits down to the table and just enjoys this meal during this nighttime truce that survived the rest of that evening and into the next day. And the wounded man stabilized, thanks to the help of the German soldier to a great extent. The wounded man stabilized, and then the two sides eventually went on their way without any bloodshed. That this could happen, and so that, as you might imagine, made a deep impression on these U.S. soldiers, and of course on Carl. Carl saw his mother in a new light, in a way. I mean, obviously he'd always looked up to his mother, but to see her think that quickly, and to have that force of personality, to where she could basically lay down the rules for these guys in a situation that could have gone much differently. It could have been very belligerent, and to pull this off. And he also saw her warmth, just sheer human fellowship of, hey, we're just people, and we have a lot more in common than otherwise. And let's sit down and just enjoy one another's company for a night, even though we can't always communicate all that well. So Carl wondered the rest of life who these guys were on both sides, but especially the Americans. He eventually, after the war, emigrates to the U.S. Of all places, he goes to Hawaii to become a baker there. He followed in his father's footsteps. His father survived the war, too, by the way. So he has a bakery in Hawaii, and that's where he's living his life. And he always wondered if he could make contact with these three American soldiers. And so in 1973, he contributed to a Reader's Digest article. And of course, Reader's Digest, you guys know, had this massive circulation.
Yeah, it used to be mega, didn't it?
Oh, it was just unreal. And that's really what fuels a lot of Cornelius Ryan's work. He had the resources of Reader's Digest to track down so many people all over many different countries in the West. And so Carl had hoped that would really link him up, but to no avail. It's not until, I think about 20 years later, the show Unsolved Mysteries. I don't know if you guys remember this one, but it was a show that aired in the U.S. with a guy named Robert Stack, and it was really a fascinating show on some levels and a bit sensationalistic, of course. But the Unsolved Mystery was, who were these GIs and how can we link up Carl with them? And as it turned out, this did put him in touch with one of the veterans. It was a gentleman who
Turns out he lived next door.
Right. They were right next door all the time. No, he actually lived the exact opposite end of the country. He lived in Maryland, and his name was Blank. Carl flew all the way. This is in 1996 as a result of the show. What happened is that Blank was in a assisted living facility, and I guess one of his caregivers or somebody, saw the episode, and he remembered this veteran talking about a story just like that.
Amazing.
And then they put two and two together with the producers of the show, and Carl meets up with this guy, and then the guy told him, your mother saved my life. For Carl to hear that, he said, "Now I can die in peace. My mother's courage won't be forgotten, and it shows what goodwill can do." Oh. And how about that?
Amazing.
So of course this was just too good for Hollywood to pass up. So there's actually a movie. It's called Silent Night, and it stars Linda Hamilton. I don't know if you've seen that, but she plays Elizabeth, and of course they take some license with it on many levels. It's probably in the movie, I think there's more tension maybe than there really was in the true incident, but it came out in 2002. It's on YouTube, so it's super easy to see. And I didn't recognize anybody in it, but maybe it's been a while since I've seen it, so maybe not. Maybe I'm just having an oversight. But
because I think what's happened now, I remember reading it and just going, yeah, that never happened.
and that's I know, and you would think it never did. I know, and actually it did happen. And yet there's another thing too I wanted to mention, and I don't know about this at all. I'm just relating it. I wonder about it. So I'll just tell you guys. There was another guy named Ralph Hill who served in the 99th Division, and of course that unit was heavily involved in the Battle of the Bulge on Elsenborn Ridge and all that. So he said he wrote a story in the Checkerboard, which was their Veterans Association newsletter, an amazing publication, by the way, that had all these great firsthand accounts for years and years. And in one of them that I found many years ago, he claimed that he was part of a group that had a very similar experience, that they had gone into a home in a cabin or whatever with he said was a Belgian woman, and the German soldiers had come to, and that she had enforced a truce, that they had put their weapons aside for the night. And I don't know about the veracity of that. I've tried to track it down more and unsuccessfully. I don't know whether maybe he read the Reader's Digest story and then conflated it to his own experience or something. I don't know. But it's possible that something like that could have happened more than once, I guess is my point.
You see, this is really interesting,
Amazing.
John, because, one of the sort of contested bits of First World War history that always comes around at Christmas is the Christmas truce to play football. And there's people who say that never happened, and there's other people say that definitely did happen. And there's a memorial now, isn't there, Jim? And there's a lot of argy-bargy.
Yeah, it's near Plug Street.
Exactly, but there's a lot of argy-bargy between the sort of between
and Hill 60 and all that, different
factions of First World War history people saying it definitely didn't happen. But here we have an actual. I mean, it's an extraordinary story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah.
It is, and it's corroborated by the GI, and by the Carl Vinken, the kid who's part of this. I mean, it'd be interesting to get the German soldiers' perspective too. I don't know that we ever had that.
Yeah, I mean, the IMDb listening is in a cabin on a World War II front. A German mom with a young son mediates a truce between 3 German and 3 American soldiers so they can all celebrate Christmas Eve, 1944 together. And you sort of think, it didn't happen.
I know. It sounds like crap, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds like it couldn't happen. And in the movie, one of the things they do, a different wrinkle than reality, one of the German soldiers is a lieutenant, like a really gung-ho kind of pro-Nazi lieutenant, and he's threatening Elizabeth, like, this will all be remembered, how you gave aid and comfort to the Americans. And so there's a lot of tension between him and the U.S. sergeant, of course, you imagine, and everybody speaks English. So, that facilitates communication. We can all imagine ourselves in a real situation like this, in which communication would be the main challenge.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, who knows how good this guy's French was and hers. And so, I mean, and hearing all that German, the thing that would have been daunting for me as an American in that situation is hearing these folks speaking German and not knowing what they're saying, and maybe even after they care for the wounded guy, wondering what happens with all that. But you probably wish that you had taken German at that stage. But
the thing is, like we're saying, I mean, you wouldn't make, if you made this up, you'd be told it was 2 on the nose, wouldn't you? You'd be told.
And yet it somehow actually happened. And it also, I think it takes us into some moral quandaries, doesn't it? About who we're fighting and why, and how the tragedy of how this happens. And when you get enemies close together sometimes like that, it leads to less tension than you might expect because of the human, just the human connection.
I mean, it's that thing that Dick Jesser said to me the other day, that, he was on Iwo Jima, and then suddenly he looks down on this, he's trying to steal a flag from, a good luck flag from a dead Japanese person. He suddenly sees all the letters from his family on in his breast pocket, and he thinks, well, I've got letters from my family in my breast pocket, and actually what divides us is less than what unites us. And he suddenly thought, well, what are we doing here? And of course, you see this time and time again, don't you? I mean, you see this with all these guys in Italy, they're sort of, they're right-eyes, and they don't deserve, they deserve nothing but contempt for kind of backing the wrong horse and getting in the fight in the first place. And then they get billeted with an Italian family, and suddenly they're, a week later, they're all the Italian family is weeping when they leave, and they promise they're going to be in touch forever, and they got off an R. And it's a statistic and a tragedy analogy all over again, isn't it? I mean, it's the same thing. The moment you actually get up close and personal and you personalize it, you realize how ridiculous the whole thing is.
How mad it all is. And compassion can make us vulnerable. And so we don't want to be vulnerable in this kind of situation, do we? So dehumanization is the core of war on some levels. That's really the horror of it all on some, in some respects too. And that's when it really shines through, when you have that one-on-one, when he sees the letters on a Japanese body, when we interact with someone from the other side, we're like, wow, what are we doing here? Very troubling.